If you've been in a corporate environment or in an educational institution anytime in the last decade or half decade, you've probably heard the term equity thrown around constantly. What is equity? What does it mean? How do we get there? Is it even possible? All of these questions are legitimate questions that we should be asking, as most people conflate the term equity with the term equality and don't even know the true definition of it. In this next clip, Douglas Murray talks about the issue of equity versus equality, as well as meritocracy in America. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it.
The issue of meritocracy in America and the wider West at the moment is a fascinating issue because we're totally torn on it. Let me attempt to sort of mend part of that tear in the following phrase. You all know the idea of straw manning. If you don't know the idea of straw manning, you should see my recent debate with Malcolm Gladwell in Canada, where he gave a superb masterclass in what it is to straw man an opponent's argument.
He's correct there. That one was pretty crazy. You should check it out. Gladwell, his entire set of arguments was straw man after straw man. It's pretty magnificent to see how Douglas sort of tears them apart. Anyway, let's keep going.
I want to do the opposite of that on the issue of meritocracy and steel man the argument. What is the argument that we could actually agree on as the issue in meritocracy in a society like ours in America? And I would say that it's something like this, that nobody should be held back from attaining whatever it is that they can attain by dint of their virtues and achievements simply because of some characteristic over which they have no say.
That's fair.
Something like that. It may not be perfect, it's something like that we're aiming for.
So if you're good enough to do it, you should have the opportunity to do it. I think that's pretty fair, and I think that that's what we've known meritocracy to be for as long as we've existed as a nation, and up until recently, meritocracy was, I thought, a good thing.
That the idea of a meritocracy is that nothing should hold you back if you have the capabilities to fulfill your goals. So if you have the capacity to be on the board of a company, you shouldn't not be on the board because you're gay or because you're a woman or because you're from ethnic minority. The interesting thing about this is I think we have almost total unanimity in a society like America about that question.
Yeah.
If you look at the polls, almost nobody doesn't agree with the aim as I've just set it out.
I would take slight issue with that. There is a non-trivial number of people who would say that by way of being a straight white male, you should not be represented on a board, for example, even if you're well qualified.
That nothing should hold you back if you have the capability simply because of something which you have no say over. The problem about this is, and one of the reasons why America in particular is so confused about the issue of meritocracy in the 21st century, is because left and right have arrived at very different ideas of how to address this question. Now, there's a critique of the right's attitude, but let me roughly lay out what I see as the right's attitude. The right's attitude on this question is something like this. It's a gradualist approach. And this has an enormous amount to be said for it. We've heard from educationalists and others, and we will do later today. The gradualist approach is that if we set up, if not the optimal conditions, at least as optimal conditions as we can set up, then this society in which people can achieve and flourish whatever their own characteristics, whatever they've started from, will occur. To my mind, it remains the best answer. However, there is a critique of it. And the critique, largely comes from the left, says it's complacent. And among other things, it takes too long. So, in recent years, the left, again, particularly in America, has been busying itself away with its own attempt to address this question. Sometimes in good faith, very often not. And its answer, of course, is equity. Its answer is, we will not reach that point of meritocratic goal unless we actually live in a country in which, by the way, only high-status professions can be demonstrated to show equity. So, for instance.
Exactly. So when you hear this conversation by the left, it's always about, as Douglas said, high status positions. So the C-suite, the boardroom, high positions of power in politics, they're never aiming for equity in lower level positions like construction workers, road workers, you name it, all the lower level stuff. It's only the positions of power that they're interested in having equity in. That's very interesting and I think very telling. And their solution, of course, is to essentially try to force people into these roles by dint of their immutable characteristics. So setting race quotas at companies, for example, or setting a gender quota or even a trans quota, right? You're putting merit on the back burner, and you're instead putting the immutable characteristics of the individual first. A great example of this, of course, is Joe Biden when he said, I don't know who I'm going to select as my vice president, but it will be a woman of color. Well, you've immediately eliminated all of the potential qualified candidates who are not women, who are not women of color, and said, I'm going to limit my scope only to this, no matter if none of them are great for the job. And the result, of course, is Kamala Harris, who is not great at the job. Let's keep going.
We will base our ideas on a whole set of industries and accomplishments on Hollywood. Brilliant. Take the least representative part of society in which people only advance because they're attractive, very rarely because of their intelligence. Take that bit of society, roll it out, complain that this female actress only got 20 million, poor thing, where the male actor got 25 million, and claim that no one will be free unless this multi-millionairess gets the same salary as the Top Gun actor or whatever.
I think he's talking about Jennifer Lawrence there. If you guys remember, she was up in arms about making, I think, a few million less than, I can't remember who it was, Bradley Cooper or something like that. But she was still making a ridiculous amount of money that most of us could never dream to make for a few months of work.
Another example is boards. I mentioned them earlier. People in America now on the meritocratic issue are obsessed with boards. Most people in America, of course, do not spend their lives sitting on company boards. There was a recent, as Vivek can I'm sure address, there was recent legislation a few years ago in California which insisted that companies, if they were going to be publicly registered in California, had to have certain representation on the boards from certain minorities. And there were certain ethnic minorities they insisted must be on them, including Pacific Islanders. Oh, and also trans people. And I got a friend of mine, I'm not a math guy, I'm a know-nothing humanities type, and but I got a math friend of mine to crunch the numbers on this, and we worked out that if the number of companies in California remained what they are now, which doesn't seem likely, but were that to happen, if you are a Pacific Islander who lives in California or a trans person who lives in California, you should clear your diary for the 2020s. You are going to be dashing from board meeting to board meeting. You're going to be doing the petroleum companies in the morning. You're going to have to be doing every university in the afternoon. It's going to be no fun.
So what he's saying there is there are more companies than there are Pacific Islanders or trans people, so it's a ludicrous quota to have. But that's California in a nutshell.
The point is that we have weirdly decided that these things, like as I say, high status professions, board membership, are the things that unless we get 50% or more female representation on boards, nobody in America is free. Unless we get precisely the number of African Americans on the board, or preferably higher, nobody is free, etc., etc. What are some of the things you lose in this? Just one of the things you lose, of course, is any focus on non-high status professions.
That's right.
Absolutely nobody on the American left, so far as I know, is bothered by the fact that most of the people who lay tarmac on the roads and the highways of America are men. Almost nobody is demanding more trans road layers.
Dude, I absolutely love Douglas's sense of humor and how he delivers it with such a deadpan manner. He's brilliant. This is great.
Almost nobody is demanding more female workers on pylons to fix when the electricity cables all go and risk their lives doing that. And almost nobody argues that. It's only the high-status professions. And this tells us something, I think, very revealing about what we actually are prioritizing in modern America.
That's right.
Now, what should we be doing? It seems to me, and I've been writing about this recently, it seems to me that we are at great risk in America in particular at the moment of falling into what in the Middle Ages was known as accidie. Accidie was a condition that
indifference,
writers
depression,
including Chaucer and Dante and others wrote about. It was about a sort of listlessness. And in the Middle Ages, accidie was recognized to be very dangerous for an individual and utterly fatal for a society.
lack of purpose.
That is, the question of what we should be doing was effectively unaddressed. Now, I'm not checking my text messages, I promise. I was very interested in a poll the Wall Street Journal carried out earlier this week, which some of you I'm sure will have seen, which speaks to this issue of accidie. Just in the last 25 years, the last quarter of a century, living memory for all of us, the number of Americans who said that patriotism was, quote, very important to them, fell from 70%, 70%, to 38%.
Wow.
Number of people who said that religion was very important to them fell from 62% to just 27%.
Jeez.
The number of Americans who believe that tolerance is an important virtue fell from 80% 4 years ago to just 58% today. 4 years. 4 years to lose that number of Americans who believe in the idea of tolerance. I would submit that when we address issues like meritocracy, we on the right have to bear in mind the following single thing, and I'll finish with that before handing over to Vivek. We have to recognize that the left has offered a totalistic explanation for human behavior.
Yeah.
A totalistic explanation. That, as I say, you will not be free until all of these odd things we've selected show representation. You must fight, and you must struggle, and you must strive, and you must insult, and you must degrade, and you must cut people off in your lives, and much more. That's something to do. That's something to do. It is an extremely ugly thing to do, but it's something to do.
And impossible.
And we, on the right, it seems to me, need to spend much more of our time not simply picking apart what the left is saying that we should do, but providing answers of our own. Saying, this is what it would look like to have a successful life in the 21st century. This is what the aim should be. You shouldn't be playing the games that the left has invited you to play, totally unwinnable games. You should be doing the following things. That seems to me, and maybe we can get on to this, to be an aspiration worth struggling for in this century. Thank you.
All right, guys, a lot to unpack there. Basically, Douglas is going off of this theme of equity and how equity gets pushed constantly, especially in the corporate world, especially in the educational institutions. Most people who throw around the word equity don't know what it means, especially in a corporate setting. They're really just using a buzzword, and they're probably thinking that it means equality. Equity means equality of outcome. Equality generally means equality of opportunity. So do we level the playing field to where there are no limitations on whether or not you can achieve something based on your immutable characteristics? That's equality of opportunity. That's saying if you get the grades, if you work hard, if you do the extracurriculars, you can get into college. Now, there's a huge case in the Supreme Court right now with Harvard University because they were striving for equity, and as a result, they were excluding Asian Americans from admittance who got the grades, had the extracurriculars, did all the work, because they didn't want Asians overrepresented in their student population. So that's an attempt at equity, and that is wrong, Full stop. It's wrong, because what you have to do is take from some to give to others, exclude some to include others. It's gross, but it's the methodology, as Douglas said, that the left has settled on for trying to right the wrongs of the past, so to speak. Affirmative action is another example. So how do we get to a place where people feel as though they have a fair shake? That's a good question. I think a lot of people shirk responsibility and have a victim mentality when they don't need to, and they use that as an excuse for why they haven't achieved anything. And now the left offers up a really appealing ideology where they're saying, no, you haven't failed because you didn't try. You failed because you're insert victim class, right? Trans, gay, black, etc. At the same time, they are fully okay with demonizing and excluding straight white men, for example, from just about everything, right? So it's an uneven application of the ideology. And what I love about what Douglas did here was he showed some numbers, like with the California example, where they literally want more people of Pacific Islander or trans identity on boards of companies than there are people to do it. So there are more companies than there are people. So you'd have to be on multiple boards if you happen to be a Pacific Islander, for example, in California, which is just nutty. It makes no sense whatsoever. And the right basically says, look, we even the playing field. We make everybody have the same opportunities. And there are still economically based grants and things like that for underprivileged students, for example. But if you get the grades, if you work hard, you get in, period. And as Douglas showed in his talk there, the left doesn't think that's enough. So you sort of see this never enough progression with progressivism. I put a tweet out quite a while back where I said, and I knew it would kind of ruffle some feathers, I said the aim of every progressive should be to become a conservative. Now, if you pick that apart, what does it mean? It means you've worked towards your progressive causes, you've achieved them, and now you want to conserve them. You want to preserve them, right? You saw it with feminism. Feminism was essentially, at first, we want the vote, then we want equal rights, etc., right? All of that exists. But feminism still exists, and it's morphed into this really sort of ugly man-hating thing where they demonize masculine traits. And it's not about equality. It's about getting an advantage, right? That's why you only hear them talk about representation in powerful positions. You don't hear them talk about representation in lower rung positions. So it's very transparent. Oftentimes, solutions that conservatives have aren't attractive, right? Because they involve hard work. They involve personal responsibility. They involve being accountable. And that's the battle we're up against as people who are on the right, people who are libertarian, people who are conservative, essentially anyone who's not on the far left. You're trying to sell something that says, hey, it's on you. And we have a population of people who don't want that responsibility. So that's why they vote in a guy like Joe Biden, because he promises to take away their student debt. He promises all these things that, of course, they never deliver. I think this was a beautifully done talk by Douglas. I love his stuff. If you've never seen him, you should definitely check him out. He has a great sense of humor, great delivery, very sharp-witted. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you smash the like button on this video if you liked it and show it to some friends. Turn on the notification bell for the next time I post a video up. I love you guys. Keep your minds free.